But welcome to our second session here in the Silverton Ballroom. I'm really excited to have you here. I think we've got 160 people online and a great audience here with us in person. So we're talking about a point that's a topic that's near and dear to my heart. And I was really pleased to get to meet Lakisha Woods, the president and CEO of the National Institute of Building Sciences. I was sharing with you that I'm a longtime sustainability and building energy geek, and that I've followed NIBS for many, many years. But I think that's a lot of our community as well. So NIBS stands tall across the industry, and we couldn't have a better person. I know you've been helping EBA and some of the other partner organizations with how we think about recruiting a diverse workforce. So I'm really excited for our audience to get to learn from you and hear your wisdom on this topic. So I'd love to introduce Lakisha Woods, the president and CEO of National Institute of Building Sciences. Thanks so much, Lakisha.
Thank you, Aaron. Wow. I really have to just say that I have not stood at a podium in front of people since February of 2020. And yet I'm still so happy to know that there are so many people online that are with us today, because that's become my comfort zone. And I actually was telling a gentleman earlier that I was so tempted to show up in a suit on the top and my pajama bottoms, just to make sure I still felt a little connected to the virtual audience, but I thought it might be a little inappropriate. Today, I am going to talk about the importance of recruiting a diverse workforce. Now, we all, I think people are hearing about this topic all the time, and we want to avoid my goal is to really end this conversation with some clear, actionable goals for everyone. And of course, we're going to go through some data and all of that, but we want to have a plan in place. I think that's what's so important. And I was really excited when Aaron asked me to be a part of today's session. Already. So I want to tell you about some of our learning objectives today. And of course, it's reviewing the data. I always say the numbers don't lie. We have to look at what the statistics tell us, and that will guide us in the direction of where we need to make change. In addition, we really have to increase our awareness of our unconscious bias. And I think we can all relate to different stories that we can think about. And I'll give you some ideas of just different ways we have our bias, but also how we can move from those biases into finding tools to help us be more successful. Really, we want to focus on that human part, which is engaging with others to develop best practices, and of course, setting that action plan. And it's important to not just set an action plan that maybe your board or your company will say, this is our plan, and then 4 years later, no one's touched the plan. You want something that's a living document that you can continue to focus on and reassess and reinvent and move the needle. So he had mentioned NIBS, and I thought it was really important to explain who we are. And I say that because actually, when I took on this job about 2.5 years ago, I didn't know who NIBS was, because I'd spent my career in construction, but just wasn't familiar with the organization. And the first thing when I came on board, NIBS was created by Congress back in 1974. And the mission is to align the industry. Congress thought that the building industry was siloed. Can you believe that? And we're still working on that today. Can you believe it? It's yes. And yes, an ongoing issue. But our purpose is to bring the industry together. Yes, each individual organization will talk about how they have unique needs, but our job is to say, what are those common challenges that go across the industry, and then how do we find solutions? So we are conveners at Nature. Our purpose is to convene the industry, talk about those problems, and then talk about how we can find solutions. And of course, workforce is one of those big topics that affects everybody in this industry. So when I came on board with NIBS, the first thing we did was actually create a new strategic plan. And I think it was really important to sort of set the direction, where we're going to go, what the focus is. And the vision is something that I I try to make sure that everything that we do connects back to that, right? At the end of the day, what's the story we're trying to tell? How are we improving lives through collaboration to integrate science into the built environment? And science can be defined so many different ways. And it's just really important for us to look at how we are, the work that we do, how is it truly impacting society? How is it impacting our industry? How is it impacting our families? I mean, this is the building industry. You build everything where we live, work, learn, and play. It integrates into everything people do. And it does improve lives. And so the more we look at utilizing sustainable tools, and the more we utilize technology to help us be more efficient, these are the things that will truly help us meet that vision. So I mentioned again that we are conveners. Our membership is so broad. It is everybody from government agencies to building owners. It is architects and engineers. It's all the associations I used to work for and all those other various organizations that are in the industry. And it's really great. It's one of those things where I said, when I went to our annual meeting, I was 2-3 weeks on the job, and it was 10% of every possible breakdown and category you can imagine in the industry. And that's what made our group unique, because again, there's any voice you're trying to tap or brainstorm with or network with, they're all connected to NIBS in some way. And so if you're trying to check with code officials, or you're looking at just different areas of the building industry, you can find those solutions through this organization and through the different resources that we create. So how did I get to NIBS? I always like to tell the story of the various associations I work for. And when my first association job was at the National Ready Mix Concrete Association. And I had no idea what concrete was, but it was a really cool job opportunity that I found when I went to the University of Maryland Job Center. And when I got to know the members, I was hooked. Right from the beginning, right out of college, I knew this is an industry I wanted to be a part of. And that's because they were so passionate about what they did. And before you know it, I was screaming at the TV saying, it's concrete, not cement. And it was just understanding the business and what they had to do. And then I had asked about one of our members. I went from the National Ready Mix Concrete Association to AGC of America. And when I was at AGC, my job was to take a look at all the .com businesses that had popped up right in the middle of the .com boom. And I was supposed to look at what tools were most important for the industry, because everybody was bombarding all these commercial construction companies saying, this is what you need, this is what you need. And what I discovered was that, oh, that's right, the construction industry is really slow to innovate sometimes. And so therefore, that's why all the .com companies thought that they should approach the construction industry. And when I was meeting with one of our members, they said, when you go to New York City and you look around, look up and recognize that all those buildings built by fax machine, because it was 30 years before they could get people to just accept that one piece of technology. And so they wanted me to have a mindset for when you're talking about change and disruption in this industry, you have to recognize the history. You need to be aware of it. Celebrate those small advancements, those small wins, and then just be careful and cautious in how you approach it. Because if you want people to make change, it can't be an attack, I guess I would best say, because that's what they felt like. They were under attack by the .com companies. And they just said, I'm not going to use any of your tools because I'm not ready and I'm still going to fax all my change orders over. So I love the story because I still just look up every time I go to New York and go, fax machine. We've definitely advanced quite a bit from technology since then, but I do want everybody to sort of think about how we, as an industry, when we think about workforce, when we think about what is needed. I have sat on so many calls where it's not me, but a older white gentleman who will say, I'm tired of walking into rooms where everybody looks like me. I've heard that so many times. And to me, it's like that evolution of technology, that the first step is awareness. There needs to be change. And there needs to be change, not because I'm telling you that, and not because every time I walk into a room, I'm the only person that looks like me, but because the people who realize that I'm in this industry and everybody that I work with looks just like me. And if you're thinking about how your business can evolve and grow and change and innovate, that comes from diversity of thought. And diversity of thought, yes, can be in people who look just like you, but more than likely, life experiences impact how you perceive things, how you view a business, how you view a product or a service. And those experiences that come from different people in different circumstances, different genders, different races, et cetera, that truly brings diversity of thought, which will change the way your company operates. So we're here to talk about workforce, and you will hear me say, and the numbers, and hold on, I'm off my little, see, I'm not reading any notes. This is a common issue. But I want to share some statistics with you because I'm a statistics junkie. And I really want you to know that right from the beginning, when I talk about diversity and inclusion and equity, my number one priority at the end of the day with everything we're going to talk about is diversity in leadership, not just diversity in the lower ranked positions within an organization. And that is so important. So everything we think about and everything we're talking about as we look at equity, as we look at diversity and inclusion, we look at our workforce, it is about leadership. And so I just want to make sure people are thinking about it that way and why it's so important. And really it's so important because, again, the numbers don't lie. So I'm going to read a stat. McKinsey Company, they do this Women in the Workplace report. They do it in partnership with leanin.org. And actually, they've been doing this survey for years. And it gets meatier and meatier every year. They get more data, more information. And of course, that they talked about how in the 2020 study, the choices that companies make today will have consequences on gender equity for decades. When you think of an industry that's dominated by men, you think about construction, right? You think about this space. And it is really shocking to me that from when I began in the industry right out of college to now, the numbers really haven't changed much as far as just gender equity in the space. Women, as of 2021 Department of Labor data, is they're 10.6% of this space. Now, I say that to you also recognizing that women make up 47% of the workforce in general, the available workforce that you can hire from. And we've got 10.6% of that. So there's a lot of opportunity for, I call it low-hanging fruit. A lot of opportunity to find new people to come into your firm that are out there waiting for you. And this data I will share with you. Now it's from 2013, but it is all occupations, the share of women. I wanted to compare the share of women in construction and extraction versus all occupations. So women, 47% of all occupations. And then construction and extraction occupations specifically, 2.6%. And that was in 2013. So when I share this, I also want to show how much the change has been from 1978 to 2012. There are industries that have truly targeted women as far as gender, and they have made a concerted, intentional effort to recruit women into their space. And when they did that, you will see that physicians went from 14% to 32%, or dentists 5% to 22%, police 7.5% to 19%. And even firefighters, even though the number is still low, went from 0.4% to 3.3%. But what does that tell you? Because construction trades went from 2.2% to 2.6%. 0.4% growth in 30 years. So when I talk about how much low-hanging fruit there is and what the opportunity is for us as an industry to improve our workforce and therefore our innovation and everything else, this is it. This is really that data, but it is this data that leads me to, additional questions. So there was a report that came out actually last week. Let me go pull this up. You'll see that it said in COVID, right, that you'll hear all the news reports and they talk about how in 2020, because of COVID, it is women who were affected by all of this, right? If the family needs more help, it's not the men that quit their jobs, it's women. And so women end up having to take on this extra burden of family responsibility, or it's just women whose positions get cut in general. And they were impacted, women were impacted, we were impacted. But since February 2020 and by August of 21, there were only 2 major industries with more women on payroll than before COVID: construction and utilities. So we, essential workers, women in construction jobs grew by 30,000 jobs, and utilities by 1,300. And all other major sectors are still below February 2020 levels. And that's as of August of this year. Now, what's interesting is that, Bureau of Labor Statistics, again, I said at the beginning that women only represent 10.6%. So we know that this year, our workforce will need 430,000 new jobs alone, just this year. So although it's great that women in the industry grew by 30,000 jobs, we still got a lot of work to do. And it's going to take intentional effort to recruit women into the space. And the other challenge is that it's IWPR's 2021 Tradeswomen Retention and Advancement Survey. They found that half of all women working in the trades say that they're thinking about leaving their jobs. And there were 2 reasons, and I'm sure everybody can guess: harassment and discrimination. So it's not just that we have to recruit a more diverse workforce. We have to change the culture, because the culture is what will really, truly make a difference in keeping, retaining, and growing your workforce. So we have to talk about those nasty biases. And I think sometimes I'll talk to my friends and they're like, I don't even want to hear the word unconscious bias again. Like, I don't want to hear it. I'm done. It's like, I've heard it and I don't want to be beat up anymore. And that's not what it's about. And I think for me, I like to give examples that are non-racially charged because they're all just biases. And I like to give the example, since I went to the University of Maryland, that when I was working at my previous job, my boss had said to me at one point, why is it that everybody you hire went to the University of Maryland? I can't help that they really push out some great people. But I had to ask myself, am I seeing something on resumes where if I'm looking at 2 resumes and one person went to Duke and one person went to Maryland, who do I want to interview? Now, that is a bias. Now, don't get me wrong. I hired somebody from the University of Virginia, from Clemson, and I think I actually did end up hiring somebody from Duke. See, I've overcome my bias. But there are a lot of tools that companies can access to really, truly help them recognize biases that they may not even think they have. Because that's why it's called unconscious bias. You don't recognize that. You go, oh, this person went to my school, or, oh, this person's from my neighborhood. It's just people by nature, like breeds like, I say all the time. And so if you're trying to recruit, you will look for someone so often that is like you. And I, talked to my board about this. We went through our nominations committee process, and by nature, we had this conversation with the diversity inclusion consultant that said, walked through, who are your top 3 friends? And then asked, what kind of car do you drive and your friends drive? Where did you go to school? All these just different traits that I guess I wouldn't have even thought about. What did you graduate from college? If so, what level? All these different elements. And most of them, or actually everybody, had everything that was exactly the same as their best friends, except me, but I'm just an odd duck because I'm a military brat. So there you go. But it was fascinating that people by nature had same friends, same characteristics. And so if that's what you do when you're searching for your friends, what do you do when you're searching for employees or board members or volunteer leaders? What does your board do? And then what tools do we have in place to help us look for different characteristics? And I do think that it's really important for us to watch that, to be aware of that, and to create standards, matrix. There are, again, a lot of tools that are available, whether you're running an individual company, a small company. I'll never forget when, again, at a previous organization, that we met with a head of someone from Kohler, and Kohler's in Kohler, Wisconsin. And they had said in the next 3 years, they will lose 50% of their workforce. They're going to retire. And they're trying to figure out how to recruit a new workforce outside of their city, right? Because everybody in Kohler, they know that audience. So how do they find new people? And the question is, how are you going to intentionally recruit new, different people from outside of your area? And who's on your staff team to do that recruitment? And do they look different than the people that are currently in leadership? And again, I go back to leadership, because people want to be where they see themselves. And so if somebody is, whether they're in high school and they're trying to think about if they should go into the trades or some other, maybe they want to be an artist, who knows what they choose to do. But if they see your industry and they don't see anyone that looks like them, then they don't think they have a place there. There's no career. So if people don't see other women, other minorities in leadership positions, then they don't have a place. And so it's important for us to be aware of that and to talk about that change in the culture. And it is more than just, I guess I would say, the change in the culture, but it's an ongoing conversation about improvement, and also celebrating, again, those successes that we have. And I think it's really important that people think about how you celebrate successes. When I talk about diversity inclusion, I have one of our big champions is our current chair for our consultative council. And this is a council within NIBS that brings together all of our association leaders, all of our CEOs to talk about challenges. But then that person, Mark Dorsey from CSI, he also is responsible for appointing 2 people to our nominations committee. And he was very intentional about who he selected to go onto our nominations committee, because he looked at our board and said, well, 1, I recognize your board said we need more diversity, but 2, to get there, it has to go, in the steps and the time that you have. So let's bring some diverse people onto the nominations committee so that they can change the conversation around that nominations process. And boy, did they. It was really important to have just a different voice that was asking questions in a different way, and that made our other board members who are on the nominations committee think differently. They all were in agreement on who they wanted in the positions, but having a different voice and people who were asking questions in a unique way was really important. And so I try my best to praise Mark all the time for bringing on those people, because if you don't tell people, yes, thank you so much for making that effort, then you're not going to find anybody else to be a champion for change. So one of the things that we actually started October of 2019. It was a Women Executives in Building Summit. We had an in-person meeting, right before then everything died. But we brought together women in the C-suite. because, well, there aren't many of us. Women in the C-suite, not just from the building industry, but also women who are in the C-suite for building-related associations. And it was important for this audience to come together because there are events for women in the construction business in general. There are events, but they're not targeted to that level, that executive level. They're just any woman in the industry come together, let's learn together. But I thought that the needs for the C-suite were really specific. And boy, was I right. Because although the audience may be small, for it to grow, you really need to bring that group together and talk about what are those common challenges and how do we advance from here. And so that in-person meeting, we had a great open dialogue and discussed a lot of things. But then as we moved into 2020, we changed it to a virtual leadership series. And it really just worked out for the benefit for us because we could bring together people more often instead of once a year. We had them for a while every other month, and then we moved it to a quarterly event. And we were able to cover a variety of topics. And what was interesting is as we talk about bringing women into the space or women in leadership, part of the challenge is not just that it's hard to get women recruited into leadership roles, but once women are in leadership roles, we've found that either they don't want to share the knowledge that they have because they don't want to toot their own horn, or it's bringing people up. And so we talked about being the only, or what are you as a female leader doing to recruit other women into the space? And sometimes if you're fighting for that one spot, then you kind of keep it to yourself because there's not room for more, or there's not a mindset or an exception to allow more women or more minorities in this space. So you're the only, and you just sort of accept that spot that you were able to win that ticket. And it can't be that way. So it's changing everybody's mindset, right? It's not just, oh, we need men to understand this. We need men, we need women, we need everybody to understand our own biases that we have, both men and women, and what we can do to make improvements. And so this series has become really, really just a great part of our portfolio and so important for us. The next thing that we did as we were talking about taking steps and being intentional about diversity is with all the wake of George Floyd and everything that happened in 2020, we received a lot of phone calls. What are you doing? NIBS, you're the convener. What are we doing to solve this? And what was interesting is I know that many companies put out letters, and this letters of support or how each company is different. And we accept all people, and that's great. You do need to say that is a step you have to take. But if your next step isn't actually taking a look at the makeup of your leadership team and taking a look at the makeup of your volunteer leadership team, your everything that there is, whether you're an association or you're a company, it is really taking a hard look at who you are. And so what we did was we convened the industry once again. And in December of 2020, we brought together CEOs from most of the major construction-related associations. And Aaron from EBA was with us, and it was great to have that support. It was great to have this great group of people come together. And we also invited the NAACP and various associations that represent minority segments of the building industry. And it was just an open conversation. We shared data that we had collected from the various groups. Do you have a diversity program? What are you, just different steps that people are taking? Do they share best practices, et cetera? But then we also just asked questions. It was really interesting to hear from the gentleman who represented Asian engineers. And he said, well, I'm representing people from 40 different countries. So you say Asian, but that is a really broad term. So let's talk about this. Let's unpack this. What are the needs of this person versus that person? It's not cut and dry. It's not black and white, but we do have to just, again, build awareness of the differences that people have, the challenges that they have, and then how do we as an industry try to make improvements? And at the end of the day, what came out of that December session was we need more data. We need to find out, because the data from Department of Labor was, we had some information, but it wasn't really specific. And again, all of this conversation, a lot of it is about culture. And so we wanted to find out where we stood as an industry. And so in February, we worked with Avenue M Group. It's actually a Denver-based company, by the way. I emailed her this morning. Sorry, I didn't tell you I was in town. And we did this survey. We conducted a survey. They pulled together the questions that were best for the industry. And then we sent it out to, I guess, 80 different associations, asking them if they would like to participate. NIBS is going to cover the cost of sending this survey. You just have to either send the link to your members or give us the information and we'll send it on your behalf. But we need to know where we stand. And much like the McKinsey report that they do with Lean In, they do that report every year and they get more information every year. So our goal was, yes, to start with this one survey, but we want to send it every year, because you can't track if you're improving the workforce if you don't know where your baseline is. You have to know where you're starting so that you can see next year, oh, well, actually, this is improved. So we have to know what the growth is. So what was interesting, with all the interest in all these companies being interested in the built environment and this equity, and we need to do the right thing, there were some companies that already had a survey that was planned. And so they already had something that they were sending out and they shared that data with us. But for the 80 companies that we asked to join us, it was a total of 20 that did send the information, and others had different reasons as to why they chose not to participate. But we hope that that number will grow each year, because again, we have to know where we stand. I received really interesting feedback from some consultants who said that they've talked to organizations where they don't want their employees to be surveyed, because it does, there's nothing wrong and there's no reason for their employees to receive this survey. So we've got some steps that we need to take to move in the right direction, and things could be great for your employees. And there's no better way to know if they're great than by asking them and letting them submit their answers confidentially to a third party, because that's how we're going to know how we're making improvements. But again, it's steps that we take. So come May, we get our survey results back. And some of the data, 59% of our respondents have been working in the industry for more than 20 years. So we've got some definitely senior people that are a part of our industry. 65% of the respondents were men and 28% were women. Now that's a pretty high number, but that's also, these are people who are members of an association. And so women are also more likely, if they're going to come in this industry, to find a home within an association and a voice and a network and a community. And so that's why you'll get a higher number of women that are a part of the association and that are in this industry. 74% were white. Again, pretty expected data there. And 81% of the survey respondents have a bachelor's degree or higher, which again, if we get a broader audience and we could get more tradespeople into this, you're going to see that number drop. But that's fine. We want them to go to trade school. Like everybody doesn't need to go to get a 4-year degree. There are great careers. Just get your training and come and be a part of this industry. That's what makes it wonderful. So as we can build this out and reach a larger audience, that's what we'll see. The other piece was what 66% of women respondents indicated that they had experienced discrimination or prejudice in the built environment based on gender. As you can imagine, and I think, yeah, I had another page, those that were a part of a minority group or a gender difference, those people did feel that they had experienced bias in the industry. They had experienced discrimination, whether it was because of their gender, their race, and they thought it was keeping them from growing in this space. So again, we look at the data because we need to be aware of it. And then the great news, I say that there's the good news and the bad news. The good news is 65% of the respondents said it is important or extremely important to increase the diversity of the built environment. But then I also look at that and I say, the bad news is only 65% thought that it was important to increase the diversity of the built environment. And again, 10% female. There's so much room for growth. So I really hope that even though that seems like a high number, that could become a bigger number as well. So one of those, what do we do? How do we move forward? And I think the big piece is engaging with others, and developing best practices. Part of what we are trying to do through the next steps of this program with the various, the consultative council and all of those CEOs that came together as a part of the social equity survey and follow up. We had another meeting in July, was it July? Oh yeah, July. And it was the end of July. And we explained, one, we walked through the survey, we talked about the results. Some organizations actually got their own piece of it. So the results we did were the whole industry, all the various organizations, and some people got their own, just what did our members say? So they got their own custom data, which was great. And what we want to do, again, is keep that survey going each year and grow the audience. But as a part of that next step, because I keep saying the goal is what action steps are we going to take? And so from that meeting and from that data, we said we recognize that there need to be changes in the culture, there need to be changes in the industry and the statistics so that we have a more diverse group. So what can we all do together today? And by today, I mean, today we're going to have a conversation and then you're going to go back and get approval from your boards. And then we're all going to sign on together by the end of September, which is coming pretty quickly. But we've asked all of our organizations to sign on, to agree to a few things. And I'm going to talk about that through this. The other piece that we're trying to do is we're telling them about, again, sharing best practices. So the first thing we had is our call to action, and I'm checking my time. Am I running too long? Okay. Good. Our call to action. So one pet peeve I have is when companies try to reinvent the wheel. We're not the first group that thinks that we should sign on to some sort of pledge, and come to find out there's a website called ceoaction.org where over 2,000 organizations have signed on to commit to making a pledge. And the pledge are the items that I've listed below. They've committed to cultivating a trusting workplace and having those difficult and uncomfortable conversations, in which we all need to do. They agreed to implement or expand unconscious bias education and share best practices or things that didn't work that they tried to do. Because again, we also should talk about our failures so that others can learn from it. They don't have to go down that same road. And then what can we do to improve? And then they also talked about creating and sharing strategic inclusion and diversity plans with their board of directors or their equivalent governing bodies. Now, there are many organizations who've created a plan. There are many organizations who've written a DEI statement. These are all steps that we need to take. But I thought instead of us creating our own call to action, we could, one, just sign on to this one that 2,000 other companies did. And what was great about this resource that's been created is that they already have best practices on their site. They already have tools for unconscious bias education. So if you're a small company and you can't afford to hire a diversity consultant, well, now all you do is sign on to this pledge and download the content that you need. So it's free and it's available. It costs nothing. It just says, I'm going to make a verbal commitment to do something, to make an effort, to try to make change. And then the other piece at the end of the day for me was, I don't know how each organization will feel. And I've heard from at least one or two people who said, well, I don't know if I necessarily want to sign on with those other 2,000 companies because I don't agree with some of their policies or politics. Okay. I'm going to step out of the politics because we're NIBS, we don't get in politics. So at the end of the day, these are the three primary goals that we need every association CEO and preferably every CEO of any company in this industry to agree to commit to build diverse leadership teams on your staff or in your volunteer leadership, to commit to share best practices. It costs you nothing. And to promote this work within your association membership, if you're an association, or if you're a company, encourage the association you're a member of to do this. That is what is so important. And this call to action, it's saying you're going to make a commitment. It's not saying you're going to fire your leadership team tomorrow and all of a sudden bring on a new diverse staff. It just means when someone is rolling out is rolling off the board, or if somebody you need to create a new position, or somebody is retiring and you're going to fill that position, you're going to be intentional about recruiting diverse talent into those leadership roles. That is all we're asking. And I really, really, really hope that at the end of September, I can share with all of our colleagues this great list of organizations that have agreed to at least these 3 primary goals. Because if we don't make these kind of commitments, then all the words and all the reports and all the statements mean nothing. If you're not going to take action, if you're not going to change the way you do business and bring diverse talent into your leadership team, it's just talk. And I feel it is my responsibility in my role as a convener to make sure that our industry is more successful. And to be there, we have to take action. And so I will say to all of the people who may be on the call that are diverse or feel like they're the odd person in the room, they don't always see someone who looks like them, whether that room is virtual or in person, embrace your uniqueness. Someone said on our previous call that we had, our web event, said, if you are one of the only people in the room that looks like you, consider it a superpower and learn how to, one, let other people know that you're approachable and connect and make people feel more empowered to learn more from you and to meet and recruit more people like you. And that is so important. You can't sit in a corner. If I sat in a corner at any of my previous jobs and just kept my head down, I wouldn't have met the amazing people that are a part of this industry. I mean, having had the opportunity to work from the subcontractor to the general contractor to the home builder, and now the whole built environment, it's amazing. To me, this was the natural evolution of my role to be here in this organization, because I have seen change. And depending on which organization's meeting I attend, I actually see more and more young people. I see more women. I see more minorities. Like I see change, and it may be slow, but again, I just say in my head, fax machine. And then I remember that we're going to get there, and it may take 30 years, or hopefully if we can make more than 0.4% increase in 30 years, that would be fantastic. Let's try for a couple percentage points. Let's be wild and crazy. And if we can make that kind of change, I really think we're going to make a difference. And it's just, again, recognizing those various biases that we have, recognizing how we can just be more inclusive. And again, look around the table. Every time you're making a decision, look around the table. Does anybody look different than you around that table? And are you making decisions about, I see people in the room looking around to see who's at the table, who are at these different tables. Yes, we have women, we have minorities, we're getting there. I love it. We're moving in the right direction. And what are you seeing when you are, again, in your workplace? And if you're in a leadership role, what are you doing to take action and not just make talk? Change. It is a thing that we have to learn to live with. And people are not comfortable with change. I did one of those surveys when I was went to one of the leadership training, and they test you on your acceptance of change. And they're the people who absolutely hate change. And then there are the people who are a crazy change agent. And I'm like, right here. Like, change everything all the time. So I got to rein it back sometimes. But it's important to at least consider, assess, and then be intentional about the change that you can make within your companies. Passion. I always like to leave with this slide, because passion is why I'm here. Passion is what I love about this industry and all that we can be and all that we can do. Again, remember the stories. Remember the stories that you make and how you're impacting the lives of everybody in this country. The work that you do, that people can breathe healthy air. It's just so important for people to feel comfortable in the places where they live, work, and learn and play. And everybody in this industry makes that possible. And it's so important to bring more people into this space so that they can help influence it, help change it, help innovate it, and make it that much better. So I will stop and see if there's any questions.
Great. Well, I was just going to thank you for your leadership with National Institute of Building Sciences and really helping. I think sometimes as EBA, we feel like we're very small, but we each can make an impact. And I just want to thank you again for your leadership in this area and helping us along, which is great, and for being here today. One question I had, and when I put my builder hat on, you know, I've been to some things where I've heard Turner construction talk or Skanska talk, and I feel like there are some great examples out there of people doing this right. And maybe without highlighting anyone in particular, picking favorites, because I think even a small builder can start doing it right. But who can we hold up, or what practices can we hold up out there right now for kind of the residential builder community?
I think what's important with the residential building community is to recognize those companies that are either, you know, what I find interesting is there's so many builders I've met who are building, you know, they may build a school, but then they're also going to build this playground in the community, and they do it they just want to, because this community needs a playground, and then they tell no one about it. Right. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's so great. You know, was it in the news? Oh no, I didn't tell anybody about that. I say all the time that builders also don't tell their story. And so I would love to be here next year sharing great stories. Please send them to me. We want to share those stories. But the building industry, they don't share their great stories of how they're making a difference, because they do it, and they do it because it's what's in their heart. And that's, again, why I love this industry. But then if you don't tell people the great things, the only thing they get to see are the bad things that happen on the news.
Right.
And so we've got to share the good. We've got to tell better stories. We've got to let people know. And yes, big companies can always create programs, and kind of big companies have to create the programs to sort of check those boxes. At our meeting, so our annual meeting, September 27th through the 29th, buildinginnovation.org. And one of our sessions, the keynote, is with Jamie from Lafarge Holcomb. Mm-hmm. And she was, I think, the first only female CEO for cement in the US. And now she's been elevated above that to their executive committee at Holcomb. And we're having a little fireside chat about that experience, her experience. And she told her story, and we put it in a blog post, but we're going to have that conversation about not just what they're doing from a sustainability perspective, but from a workforce perspective, what went well with such a big company like that, but also the still ongoing struggles because of culture. And in COVID, what we've learned is the cultural bias that we're running into now is, well, our industry is out in the field, right? We're out there, we're working, we're on roofs, we're building, you know, we're working. And so therefore our team also must be physically in our office versus working from their home, where they can also get the job done. But there's this obligation sometimes, and some companies will say, well, yeah, but we need to show that we're in the office. Well, that mindset is, again, it's a change thing. Well, I don't want to change. I need to see the people working. I see many people at previous organizations that sat behind their desk watching Hulu. So don't think because somebody's at their office desk that they're actually working.
Solitaire.
Right. It's about the end product and what they produce. And so if you're trying to recruit a diverse workforce, you're trying to recruit more women, well, that flexibility to be able to work from home helps with drop off and pickup for you know, daycare or whatever it may be. They don't have to drive as far to get to that job, so they can complete a longer day from their home office. So how are you as an organization making flexible changes in order to make a more diverse culture for that person to be successful?
Fantastic. Another question from the audience.
Yes, Jim, Drexel Building Supply in Wisconsin. We employ 650 plus employees in the construction supply industry. And you actually made me feel pretty good. I'm a director of development for us, which oversees our leadership team. And our leadership team is actually at 30% women. And we would like to get that to 50, including, I believe, our CFO, Julie, was the original attendee in your 2019 process of women's leaders. But I look at one thing when we're developing, and we just actually made a big commitment, not so much diversity. We put to the Madison Builders Association, we gave them $1.5 million to try to work with workforce diversity. And this makes me thought it's great to work on companies and leaderships and say you're going to develop and hire more leadership in the areas of equality and gender and all that. What is being done at the lower level? I come from teaching at the university level and coaching, and it was hockey. You don't put an NHL player by not developing them at the 6 and 8 year old level. What are we doing at the elementary, middle, high school, and college levels to grow women and not put them in a corner, but also say, you're going to take this leadership role today in the classroom. You're going to do this today. You're doing it, pushing, giving them the push to encourage it. I will say, we just did this with one of our teams. Our window leader is the only female in her department. Everybody under her is a male. We went around and interviewed everyone in the department what they thought of this everything, including their leader. They can't see any better leader than it being a woman in that position in the construction industry. We do this around. That's why we love to grow, because we've seen that our company and growth is huge by having opportunities for women and gender equality and all that in our program. We're trying to grow that way, including all the way out in our production facilities that build trusses, that build wall panels, that you look at that, we're above 15 to 20 to 30% all that. But what are you guys focusing on at those lower levels to help that growth?
Absolutely. I think one thing is for certain, we have to do both. Right? We have to take the team, the people that have been experienced in the industry, but maybe never got a chance to get elevated to a role that they should have been. Those people should have an opportunity to grow into leadership positions. But it also requires all of us to take a look at the people who are up and coming. And there are a lot of great programs that are out there, Skills USA and all that. They're trying to train people to come into the industry. But again, it's about not just bringing people into the industry to teach them so that they can grow within the business, but also making sure that we don't lose them along the way. And that, again, is that culture change of even just teaching people what things you should and should not say in the workspace. And even as common as bringing younger people in. And I think about how people will say, oh, well, this kid was talking about blah, blah, blah. Okay, first of all, they're 35. They're not a kid. But so often, right, I'll hear our older members that would refer to somebody that is, under the age of 40 as a kid. Well, you're not going to get them to want to stay in your business if you're calling them a kid and they've got a great idea and they're going to elevate your business. So respect the position, right? And that could be male, female, doesn't matter, right? There's all, again, those biases by you get to this age and all of a sudden you change your lingo. So it's everyone, and everybody has their own individual challenges that they've got to adjust in order for people to feel accepted in the space. And I wrote a book that's coming out in February, and I talk about just that, because we talk about empowering fearless leadership and having women come into roles. Again, as I'd mentioned, it's not just that you want a woman to be able to come into this space, but she has to feel accepted there. And then she also has to do what she needs to be heard and be seen as a leader, not to just to fall into what would be considered a stereotype. And so it takes everybody around to change. And also it requires people to change how we talk to kids, because how often, when was the last time you gave a young child a construction related toy, right? It always goes to a boy. It never goes to a girl. Well, shoot, my daughter loves driving that Deere tractor when we go to the farm. She loves driving that tractor. And we don't do that, right? We teach boys that they should be in this industry. So it's our fault. It's everybody's fault of how we expect people, how they see people in this industry. They have to see both men and women in this space, and it starts very young. And that is what's really important.
Hi, my name is Laura Russello. I'm an independent consultant and I'm helping EBA with fundraising at the moment. My question is, what is NIBS or any of your affiliate organizations doing in terms of recruiting those 430,000 people that need to come into the industry? Are you looking at specific cities or even neighborhoods within cities where unemployment rates might be higher and where people might be more in need of a new career?
So NIBS, our role, what we do is we bring awareness. We convene, we pull data and research, we talk about what those challenges are. And then there are other great companies in this industry that focus on recruitment, retention, training. And so they'll do that. And I actually, when you asked this question about a company that does a great job with recruiting, I can't believe I didn't immediately say Taylor Morrison. Now, of course, it's led by Cheryl Palmer,
right.
And she is the only female CEO of a publicly traded. Right.
Yeah,
firm. So
that's great
publicly
advice.
traded.
I was going to say it.
But I know. No. Because I was like, why did I not say Cheryl?
Yeah.
Delete. She'll be mad. She'll
fantastic.
delete the photo I have with her. But again, the other great. What I can't wait to see is an organization that's not led by a woman, that has 50% female and minority and all that in their leadership, right? That comes from a different party.
Yeah.
So that's when we will know we made it to where we need to be.
Well, again, a shout out to Josh Greyer with Housing and Urban Development, who is on the call and reached out to you and I about some ideas that they have as well. But again, I want to thank you so much for your leadership. It's been critical in my understanding and in guiding EBA through this. I hope we're doing 10% of a good job at doing this. And I hope what we can do is encourage the rest of our membership across the country, across the United States, across Canada, around the world, to start to think about this. Because I think at the end of the day, it's a human capital issue. And I don't want to say we're dying as an industry, because that's so dire, but I mean, we're down, 4 to 6 million houses in the United States right now. We're down 500,000 laborers in the United States. If we don't tap into every source of human capital that's available, your business is going to be at risk long-term.
Absolutely.
So,
and it's not that it's just the right thing to do. It's the profitable thing to do.
It absolutely
Your business
is.
will be more financially successful if you have a more diverse team.
Right. And then I just want to add a plug for EBA. We do have the Next Gen Scholarship Fund. And as I mentioned earlier, we started that and it was really for students. And, we're from Minneapolis. So myself and Nancy and Gabrielle are in Minneapolis. Luden is in New York. Mary's out in Maine. But we were so impacted by the George Floyd tragedy in Minneapolis, we couldn't believe what happened. And we said, we can't wait. We got to do something now. So the EBA Next Gen Scholarship Fund, we've really opened that up to it's women, it's veterans in transition, it's diversity minority candidates. And we offered free scholarships for the EBA Summit for them to come. People can have free scholarships to earn EBA certifications. We've got 175, but we still need your help in engaging with those people, right? And I think it's probably more to your question, which was, how do we engage people from the bottom, but create a view that they can see at the top and create that pathway to great jobs? And I think the Josh Greyer's comment was a little bit around, how do we make it that the high performance or the green building industry, it seems like it's more interesting to young folks generally, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So how do we step out? How do we lean into that? Maybe that's the final comment.
It's tell your story.
Yeah, tell the story.
You've got to get out there and tell the story.
Yeah.
And we tend to talk to each other in our construction terminology,
Right.
but you need to
You gotta
be able
break it down, right?
translate what you're doing into why it matters and why it impacts. You've got to reach that emotion, which
Right.
I know that people don't like to talk about emotion, but they always
Yeah.
say, make them laugh or make them cry. And that's how they're going to remember what you had to say.
Well, one interesting thing, Lakisha, is we're starting to see, and I came more in the past from commercial construction and then to residential construction. Most of the big commercial companies have a sustainability report, and they are having to pull those stories out and report on environmental, social governance. And I think that Taylor Morrison also is one of the first in the country to have a sustainability report, but that kind of gives you the guidance as a builder to start to tell your story, to start to write down the things that you're doing as an organization, and make sure you've got to tell those stories to the young people that are sitting, and it doesn't matter what age they are, but the people that are sitting across from you, don't hide it, tell those stories.
Absolutely.
Great. Well, thank you so much for being here. It's absolutely my honor to have you speaking at the EBA Summit.
Thanks.
And thanks everyone out there. Have a great day.
Bye.